It was supposed to be our night. My husband and I were celebrating both his firm's success and our 12th wedding anniversary. I'd spent the afternoon at the salon, had my dress altered at the last minute so it hugged me perfectly. I walked in with a small smile, expecting to see him proud, waiting for me near our reserved table. Instead, I froze. At the center table, directly across from the CEO, sat a woman I recognized only from passing glimpses at the office, the assistant who always laughed too hard at his jokes. Her legs were crossed like she owned the place, her manicured hand resting possessively on my husband's arm. My seat, with the little golden name card that had said Rachel Zadovsky, was gone. In its place, a card with her name printed in bold letters. I thought my eyes had to be lying. I moved closer, waiting for him to correct the mistake, to laugh and say, "Sweetheart, sit down, this is silly." But he didn't. He looked at me with a flicker of guilt in his eyes, then glanced at the woman beside him as if weighing whose comfort mattered more. "Rachel," he said softly, barely audible over the music, "maybe sit at one of the side tables tonight. We're doing some restructuring. Restructuring. That was the word he used. Like our marriage, my place at his side was just another spreadsheet entry. The blood roared in my ears, drowning out the clinking glasses and murmurs. Guests were watching, colleagues, clients, people who had shaken my hand at past events and called me the backbone behind his success. Their eyes shifted now, pitying, entertained, some whispering behind napkins. I clenched my bag against my side. Inside it, I carried a folder. I hadn't planned to use it tonight. It was supposed to be for an entirely different conversation. But the weight of it pressed against my ribs like a secret weapon. "Excuse me?" I said, my voice sharper than I intended. The mistress smiled, tilting her head like a cat toying with prey. "He asked me to join him here. You don't mind, do you? It's better for appearances." Appearances. My hands shook. I had endured years of long nights alone, of dinners gone cold while he worked late. I'd believed in him, trusted him, and now here he was, handing me over to humiliation like it was nothing. The CEO cleared his throat, uncomfortable. A couple across the table shifted in their seats. Phones were out. I could see little red recording lights aimed in my direction. This would not remain private. Something inside me snapped. I leaned across the table, locked eyes with my husband, and said loud enough for every corner of that ballroom to hear, "You just demoted your wife in front of the entire firm. Congratulations. I hope she's worth everything you're about to lose." Gasps rippled. My husband's face turned pale, but he still didn't move, didn't defend me, didn't even look ashamed. So I acted. I pulled my arm back and slapped him hard across the face. The sound cracked like a gunshot, silencing the room. His wine glass tipped, spilling red across the white linen. The mistress flinched, but no one moved to stop me. For one long, suspended moment, I stood there, every eye on me. My pulse raced, but my spine was straight. I wasn't going to shrink. Not tonight. I slid my bag strap higher onto my shoulder, turned on my heel, and walked out without another word. Behind me, I heard the murmurs rising, the buzz of phones capturing every angle. By morning, half the office would have replayed it on loop. In the hallway, the quiet hit me like a wall. My hands trembled, but not from fear, from fury. The weight of the folder in my bag steadied me. It contained bank statements, copies of emails, a trail I had half collected months ago when suspicion had gnawed at me. I hadn't wanted to believe it, but now I knew. I pressed the elevator button with deliberate calm, inhaled deeply, and stared at my reflection in the polished steel doors. My lipstick was perfect, my hair intact, but my eyes were different, harder, sharper. When the doors opened, I stepped inside and whispered to myself, "He thinks he embarrassed me tonight. He has no idea what's coming." The doors shut, sealing the vow in the empty box of steel and glass. And for the first time in years, I felt something powerful. Not despair, not heartbreak, but clarity. I was done playing the loyal wife. From this night on, I would be his reckoning. I left the gala behind, heels clicking like war drums on the marble floor, carrying not just my bag, but the fire of a promise. He wanted appearances? I would show him what it looked like when the whole world watched him fall. When I got home from the gala that night, the condo felt colder than usual. Boston's skyline glittered through the windows, but all I could see was that smug look on her face and the way he let her take my chair like it meant nothing. I dropped my bag on the kitchen counter, sat down, and finally let myself think about how we'd gotten here. We met in college when he was still juggling part-time jobs and dreaming about making it big in finance. He was charming back then, the kind of man who could talk his way into a room and make everyone believe he belonged. I was the grounded one, the one with steady savings and a stubborn work ethic. When he wanted to take unpaid internships to build connections, I was the one paying rent, covering groceries, making sure the lights stayed on. He promised me it was temporary, that one day we'd live the life he swore he could give me. I believed him. After graduation, when the opportunity finally came, a junior analyst role at a respected firm, he almost didn't take it because the salary was laughable. I pushed him into it, telling him it was a stepping stone, and while he climbed that ladder, I cashed out part of the inheritance my parents left me to buy our condo in Back Bay. My name was on the deed, but his pride made me put both names down. I told myself it was a symbol of partnership. Now, staring at the skyline, I realized it was just another mistake. We had a daughter, Julia, 2 years later. She became my anchor, the reason I tolerated his late nights and endless excuses. Whenever he came home past midnight smelling of whiskey and client dinners, I tucked her in tighter and told myself he was just chasing success. I was building a home, raising a child, and holding us together while he was out building his image. Looking back, the signs had been there. The sudden gym memberships, the expensive watches, the way he guarded his phone like it was a vault. I remember one night finding a receipt for a dinner at a rooftop bar I'd never been to. 2 entrees, champagne, and a dessert meant for sharing. He laughed when I asked, kissed me quickly, and said it was a client thing. I let it slide, because admitting the truth felt scarier than ignorance. But the truth doesn't stay buried. Julia was the one who pulled the first thread. She's only 10, but kids see more than we think. One Saturday afternoon, she climbed onto the couch beside me and asked, "Mom, why does Dad always smile at that lady at his office? The one with the shiny nails? He smiles at her different than he smiles at you." My stomach dropped. I asked her what she meant, but she shrugged, distracted by cartoons. Still, the words lodged in me like glass. I wanted to deny it, to protect her from the storm I felt brewing, but I knew she'd seen something I couldn't ignore. The betrayal wasn't just his anymore. It was a wound spreading into our daughter's life, poisoning her innocence. And that, more than anything, was what hardened me. By the time the gala happened, I already had the folder in my bag. Months of quiet digging. Bank statements showing money siphoned from our joint account. Credit card charges for hotels in the city. A string of emails I'd printed from his laptop when he left it open one morning, careless after a late night. I had kept them tucked away, unsure if I'd ever have the courage to face them. But that night, watching Julia's face in my mind as he let another woman humiliate me, I knew this wasn't just about saving my pride. It was about reclaiming everything I'd sacrificed. The years, the money, the love, the stability I gave him while he built his shiny facade. It was about protecting Julia from thinking this was what marriage looked like. I stared out the window until my reflection blurred with the lights of Boston. I whispered to myself, "No more excuses." For once, I wasn't thinking about how to hold the marriage together. I was thinking about how to tear his world apart, piece by piece, until he felt the emptiness he'd left me with. The betrayal was undeniable now. Julia's words, the receipts, the spectacle at the gala, the case was closed. And as I shut the blinds and walked into my bedroom alone, I felt the first spark of power flicker inside me. He thought he'd humiliated me in front of the world. He hadn't seen anything yet. When the elevator doors opened and I stepped out into the lobby, the city felt less like a backdrop and more like a chessboard. The humiliation at the gala had been the opening move. I could either sit in the middle of that board and wait for him to checkmate me, or I could start making the moves that would change the game. I went home, but I didn't fall apart. I packed. Practical things first. My daughter's school uniform folded into a tote, a spare set of winter coats, the jewelry I never wanted to imagine losing. I pulled the folder from my bag and spread the papers across the kitchen island like evidence on a lab table. Bank statements, hotel receipts, a chain of emails. Each sheet was a match I could light. I called my lawyer before midnight. Her voice was calm, which did more for me than any pep talk. "Freeze the joint accounts," I said. "File for temporary custody paperwork if we have to, and don't tell him I called yet." I read off account numbers and dates while she made notes. There was no drama, no pleading, just the efficient language of someone used to getting results. When she told me the bank could place an emergency hold with a signed affidavit, I felt the first small victory. Next was the bank. I walked into our neighborhood branch with purpose, sat down with a manager, and slid copies of the statements across the desk. I explained in plain terms: unauthorized transfers, sudden withdrawals, expenses that matched nobody's employment. I signed the forms. They put the hold on overnight. He'd wake up tomorrow and his debit cards might not work. No spectacle, just a quiet professional strike. I changed passwords, email, brokerage, shared cloud accounts, everything that gave him access. I set up two-factor authentication on my phone, then opened a separate account in my name alone. I transferred emergency funds there, enough to secure a place, a lawyer retainer, school costs for Julia. I wasn't going to be stranded because someone else had been reckless with our finances. I called the real estate agent I'd interviewed 2 years ago, the one who'd liked my taste in clean lines and efficient staging. "List the condo," I said. "Confidentially. I want it staged next week and on the market within 10 days. She asked a few practical questions: timing, pricing, whether Julia would remain here while we sorted custody. I answered each one succinctly. Listing the place wasn't about spite, it was a strategic reallocation of assets. If money was the language he used to barter loyalty, I would make sure I owned the terms of that conversation. I arranged for movers to take a handful of boxes to a storage unit under my name and to bring certain items to my sister's house for safekeeping. I had a locksmith change the locks on an afternoon when he was supposedly in a client meeting. He called my phone twice while I was doing it and left a voicemail that sounded like someone trying to be casual. I didn't answer. I also started pulling our private life into the public record in a controlled way. Emails were securely copied to my lawyer. The receipts went into a folder marked, "For counsel." I didn't want revenge that looked like a tantrum. I wanted a dismantling that bore the weight of proof. When you play with evidence, you are guaranteed an audience that cannot just shrug and move on. Between calls, I made plans for Julia. Her teacher would bring her to my sister's this weekend. I packed her favorite books and left instructions for bedtime, a small ritual of normalcy in the center of the storm. I photographed everything I moved, time-stamped the photos, and sent them to my lawyer. This was meticulous. It felt surgical. He texted me that night. "We need to talk," it read. Short. Contained. The kind of message a man uses when he wants to appear reasonable. Underneath, my phone showed 3 missed calls. I ignored the call and put the phone face down. The bank hold would be processed by morning. The realtor would be staging the condo by week's end. And the lawyer would file the initial motion within 48 hours if he escalated. I had already anticipated his attempts at charm, at damage control, at casting me as the unstable one. I had answers for that: documentation, witnesses, receipts, a timeline. At 8:17 a.m. the next day, my phone buzzed with an alert. A debit attempt declined. His name popped up on a screen at an expensive downtown lunch spot, a card reader politely refusing the charge. Minutes later, another alert. An attempted transfer out of our joint account flagged and held. By 8:45, the law office called to say they had filed for temporary measures and served notice to his email. When he finally called, the voice on the other end was stripped of rehearsed calm. It was sharp, raw with confusion. "Why are my cards not working?" he demanded. I listened to the panic in his voice and felt neither triumph nor glee. I felt the clean satisfaction of a plan executed. He was the first to react to my move, but he was reacting to something that had already been set in motion. The game had changed. I was no longer waiting for him to make mistakes. I was shaping the board. "Because I put a stop to them," I said. "You made your choices. I'm making mine." The morning after I hit pause on our accounts, the world that had looked like his began to splinter in small, loud ways. I expected the bank to act. I did not expect how quickly everyone else would notice. The first ripple hit at 9:30, when a colleague texted me a gif of a card reader refusing a charge with the caption "awkward." It was petty, but it told me how fast a single transaction could become gossip. By 10, a mutual friend, someone who'd once congratulated us at our wedding, sent a tentative message asking if everything was okay. The questions multiplied, and each one built pressure around him like a tightening noose. At the firm, murmurings turned into pointed looks. Midday, I had a coffee across the street and watched the way his office window registered movement. Men clustering, phones out, whispers folding into the stairwells. He was a man whose power came from three things: access, reputation, and the illusion of control. Cut off the access, and the illusion starts to crumble. I didn't need to gloat. I had learned the value of silence. Instead, I let the evidence do the talking. HR called to schedule a routine meeting with his team lead. A partner texted the same thing. The mistress, the woman in the red dress at the gala, found herself increasingly invisible. People who'd once smiled politely in the hallway now avoided her, their eyes flicking away like they'd been caught looking at something shameful. The first real public consequence for him came that afternoon. He went to a lunch with a longtime client who liked to see strength in a partner. He stood to pay the check and the card declined. The moment was small and humiliating on its own, but it was the way the client's eyebrow arched, the way conversation dried up as his name pinged on other phones with notifications about flags and holds. By the time he left, the client had suggested they postpone a pending deal. Reputation, once frayed, unravels quickly. At the office, whispers turned to outright questions. Someone leaked an internal rumor about marital troubles and financial irregularities. The mistress's managers began to ask awkward questions about her involvement with a senior executive. HR opened a discreet inquiry. The woman who'd smiled at me so confidently at the gala was now walking with her head down, answering terse emails and avoiding the cafeteria at peak hours. She hadn't imagined the social fallout. She'd been playing a game without reading the rules. Family began to stir too. My sister called first, not to ask what I planned next, but to tell me how their mother had frowned when my brother-in-law brought up the gala at Sunday dinner. Then my mother called, her voice tight with worry and anger. She didn't ask me to reconcile. She asked if I was safe. My father, who'd always admired control, sent a curt message. "If you need anything, say the word." Those were not empty words. Families pick sides in ways that can change trajectories. His family's calls were quieter and more careful. A cousin trying to broker a peace, a sibling who called under the guise of concern, and then put an awkward silence on the line whenever he mentioned the mistress. Allies were rearranging themselves. Even his allies at work started to distance. A partner who'd once praised his contributions asked, in a meeting, for clearer documentation on expenses. Another colleague who had promoted him subtly shifted projects away from his desk. Power is porous. When the surface shows a crack, people start moving to safety. Meanwhile, the mistress was discovering her new role as the punchline. At first, she held her chin high, flashing the same smile she'd worn at the gala. But by midweek, she couldn't ignore the way conversations halted when she walked into a room. The firm's wives and girlfriends, women who'd politely nodded at her before, now exchanged loaded glances whenever she entered the gala lounge or cafeteria. She tried posting a photo on social media of a girls' night out, but it was instantly screenshotted and circulated with snide commentary. "Guess who paid for the champagne?" She deleted it within hours, but the damage was done. Once the crowd senses weakness, it doesn't let go. I watched this all unfold without rushing it. I had no appetite for petty revenge. My strategy was to let consequences accumulate until they formed an undeniable pattern. Each declined card, each postponed deal, each whisper in a hallway. They were the chisel strokes that would remove the facade he'd built. By late afternoon, one of his junior associates, the kind of person who knows how fragile alliances are, forwarded me a screenshot. It showed a terse email to the whole team about unexpected personal matters and an instruction to redirect client calls. That was the language of damage control. Sterile, corporate, careful. Through all of it, I kept my face composed. At home, Julia colored at the kitchen table and asked me why Daddy sounded worried on the phone. I told her, simply, that grown-ups sometimes make mistakes and that we would be okay. She accepted that version the way children do, untroubled, trusting. Protecting that trust was as much a part of my plan as freezing accounts. When the sun dipped and the office lights in the financial district blinked one by one, my phone buzzed with an incoming call from his number. I didn't answer. My voicemail filled with a single clipped message at first. "Call me back." Then, as the hours passed and the chorus of institutional consequences mounted, his voice returned in a different tone. Urgent, thin, brittle. He asked where I was, asked if we could talk, tried to sound ordinary. The message faltered into the kind of pleading that had never been part of him. "Rachel, please. Let me explain. Don't do anything drastic." A minute later, another call. Then another. I watched his name light the screen and swallowed the small, private satisfaction that came from hearing the panic he had so long perfected. It was the sound of the first domino starting to wobble. He showed up at the building before midnight. I saw him through the security camera feed, the concierge later told me. Standing at the desk, hands braced on the counter, voice low and urgent. When they asked for ID, he fumbled. They called their supervisor. He paced, then raised his hands as if to demand someone find me, to demand that the world return to the neat lines he liked. They informed him I had changed the locks. He pounded the marble counter and left in a storm of suits and collars, humiliating himself under the fluorescent lights where clients and doormen watched. He had lost access in the quietest, most practical way possible. It was a small thing, but it spoke volumes. The man who had always controlled the room could not control the front desk. He had been confident for years. Now, for the first time, he was scrambling. He'd make louder moves next. Calls to his partner, threats about reputation, possibly a legal notice. But the dominoes were already set. And somewhere between the failed transactions, the whispering partners, and the mistress's dwindling smiles, the first real consequences had begun to land. He wanted to reach me. He wanted a conversation. He would get one eventually. But it would be on my terms. By the end of that week, whispers weren't enough for him anymore. He needed to be seen reclaiming control, to prove to his world that he wasn't the man whose card had been declined in front of a client, or the husband abandoned after a gala. He called, texted, sent flowers to my sister's house where Julia and I were staying. I ignored every single attempt. Then he made the mistake of trying to stage a reconciliation in public. Saturday night, I agreed to dinner with my sister and her husband at a restaurant on Boylston Street. A place we'd all gone to before, crowded enough that privacy was impossible, expensive enough that it attracted the people he wanted approval from. I chose that restaurant deliberately, knowing he might show up. Some traps don't need bait, just the right setting. Sure enough, halfway through my meal, the air shifted. I felt him before I saw him, the sudden hush at nearby tables, the waitstaff's nervous glance, and then his shadow falling across my plate. He arrived in a tailored suit, the mistress trailing behind in a too-short dress, her smile stretched too thin. "Rachel," he said, like we were long-lost friends, not a husband and wife separated by betrayal. His voice was loud enough for the room to hear. "Can we talk? Just 5 minutes." I didn't look up at first. I cut into my steak, chewed slowly, and let the silence burn a hole in his confidence. When I finally raised my eyes, the room was watching. Forks suspended midair, phones angled discreetly. "You've had months to talk," I said. My voice carried, steady and sharp. "You used that time to lie. Why would tonight be any different?" The mistress shifted uncomfortably, clutching her purse like it was armor. My sister sat rigid beside me, daring him to say one wrong word. He tried for charm. "We don't need to do this here. Let's go outside, away from all these people." "All these people?" I tilted my head. "You mean the same colleagues and clients who watched you parade your mistress in my seat at the gala? The same people who've been whispering about your frozen accounts and postponed deals?" A ripple of laughter spread across the restaurant. He flushed red, then pale. "Don't exaggerate," he snapped, voice cracking. "This isn't good for Julia. We should think of her." That was when I stood. My chair scraped back, loud, and every head turned. "Don't you dare bring her name into this," I said. "She's the only one I'm protecting in this mess. You humiliated me in public, so you'll get the same in return." The mistress tugged his arm, whispering, "Let's just leave." But he shook her off. His pride outweighed his sense. So I reached into my bag. This time, I pulled out the folder I'd carried for weeks. I laid it flat on the table, flipped it open, and held up one sheet for everyone around us to see. It wasn't private emails or texts. I had no interest in violating decency. It was a credit card statement, highlighted in neon yellow, showing thousands spent on hotel rooms, jewelry, and late-night bar tabs. "This," I announced, "is what my husband considers business expenses." Meanwhile, I was raising our daughter and keeping our home. He was busy playing sugar daddy to his assistant. The room gasped, phones tilted higher. I knew within hours these words would live on Instagram stories, TikTok clips, and office gossip chains. He froze, hands trembling at his sides. "You think you can destroy me like this?" he hissed, trying to lower his voice, but the microphones of the public didn't need volume. They needed spectacle, and I had just given them one. "No," I said. "I don't need to destroy you. You're doing that yourself. I'm just making sure the audience sees it clearly." The mistress pulled her arm free completely now, stepping back. "I didn't sign up for this circus," she muttered, loud enough for the front tables to hear. Her heels clicked away, each step a nail in his coffin. He reached for her, but she didn't turn back. The crowd parted to let her through, their eyes fixed on her as if watching a ship sink in slow motion. I leaned closer, low enough for him to hear but still sharp enough to cut. "This is your life now. Every lie, every dinner bill, every sneer you threw at me, it's coming back with interest." Then I stepped back, raised my voice one final time, and delivered the line that would echo, "Gentlemen, ladies, if you ever wondered what it looks like when a man loses everything, watch closely. This is what betrayal costs." Applause broke out. Not loud, not coordinated, but scattered and genuine, like relief. A few people clapped discreetly, others shook their heads. He stood frozen, mouth opening and closing with no words forming. The restaurant had passed judgment. I gathered my bag, slid the folder back inside, and kissed my sister's cheek. Then I walked out, head high, while he stayed behind, surrounded not by allies, but by witnesses. On the street, the air was cool, sharp against my skin. I felt lighter than I had in months. He could spin narratives, pay for interviews, beg for sympathy. But the truth was out, stamped into the public record by his own arrogance. That night, my phone buzzed nonstop. Friends sent screenshots of posts. Finance exec exposed at Boston restaurant. Comments piled up. "Karma served hot, she's a legend. Don't mess with wives who keep receipts." A video of my line had already been clipped and captioned. I didn't need to watch it to know what it meant. He had been humiliated once at the gala. Now it had happened again, bigger, louder, and in a way that would stick. His mistress had abandoned him mid-scene. His colleagues had proof of his recklessness, and his name, once tied to ambition and polish, was now the punchline of Boston's weekend gossip. As Julia slept soundly at my sister's, I sat on the balcony and let the city hum around me. My hands no longer shook. The power had shifted, and the world was finally seeing him for what he was. This was only the second act of his undoing, and he was already unraveling in front of everyone. And the best part? I hadn't even played my strongest card yet. The restaurant incident hit him harder than I expected. By Monday morning, the clip of me holding up the credit card statement had already been reposted hundreds of times. TikTok teens added dramatic background music. LinkedIn posts from smug executives called it a lesson in transparency. And on Facebook, mothers and community groups were praising me like I was some suburban Joan of Arc. He couldn't hide anymore, so he did the only thing a man like him knew how to do. He tried to spin the story. Tuesday, a statement appeared on his firm's website. Carefully written, probably drafted by some PR junior who hated every second. Our colleague is facing personal challenges, and we ask for privacy as he resolves family matters. But the damage was already done, and privacy is a word that invites more digging, not less. That same night, he went further. A local business podcast posted a teaser. Exclusive interview with finance exec, his name. Clearing the air. The image was of him in a crisp suit, sitting in front of a microphone, his hands folded like a man of reason. I almost laughed. He wanted to play the victim. When the interview dropped, I listened from my sister's kitchen. His voice was steady at first, but too polished, too rehearsed. He called the gala a misunderstanding, the restaurant scene an unfortunate overreaction, and me, a wife struggling with stress and misplaced anger. He framed himself as the hard-working husband who had been undermined publicly by a private dispute. It was a performance, a calculated attempt to cast me as hysterical, irrational, the bitter woman tearing down a good man's career. But then came the receipts. I didn't leak them myself. I had given copies of everything to my lawyer, who had quietly passed the documentation to the court for our pending motions. Somewhere between the clerk's desk and the courthouse hallways, someone snapped photos. By Wednesday, screenshots of hotel invoices and emails were circling online. Not doctored, not vague. Cold, clear, time-stamped truth. One email in particular detonated the narrative he'd tried to build. In it, he promised the mistress he'd move money around so she could quit her job without raising suspicion. He even listed the bank account transfers. That message became the headline on half a dozen finance blogs. The backlash was immediate and merciless. On Twitter, hashtags erupted. Jack receipts don't lie and finance fraud love. On Instagram, meme pages plastered his photo under captions like, "When you expense your mistress but not your wife's patience." Even his LinkedIn, the fortress of self-importance he worshipped, was flooded with sarcastic comments on his old posts about integrity in business. The firm had no choice but to distance itself. An internal memo leaked, stating he would be taking a leave of absence. Colleagues who had once called him a rising star deleted their congratulatory comments from years past. That silence screamed louder than insults. And the mistress? She went radio silent. Her social media accounts vanished. Rumors swirled that she'd been put on unpaid leave while HR reviewed her conduct. Some said she'd been spotted leaving his condo with a suitcase. Others claimed she was staying with her parents in Connecticut, hiding from the storm she'd thought she could ride. For me, it wasn't about schadenfreude, though I won't lie. Watching him squirm had its moments. It was about balance. For years, he had been the one shaping the story of our life. The successful executive, the supportive wife at his side, the picture-perfect family. Now the truth was public, and the story wasn't his anymore. But he wasn't done fighting. He posted a long Facebook note, the kind no one reads past the second line, about betrayal cutting both ways. He implied I had gone to extremes and weaponized private matters. He said he forgave me and hoped one day Julia would understand that her mother had acted out of anger. That line nearly broke me. Using our daughter's name in a PR stunt? That was a new low. But instead of lashing out, I let silence do its work. Because the internet doesn't forgive hypocrisy, and the comments section devoured him alive. Forgave her? For what? For catching you? Bro spent her inheritance on hotel rooms and thinks he's the victim. This is why receipts matter. By Friday, he was trending again. But not for his interview, not for his statement. He was trending because someone had stitched his Facebook post with a clip of me at the restaurant. The contrast was brutal. His long-winded excuses beside my one clear line. This is what betrayal costs. And that was the difference. He needed paragraphs. I needed one sentence. The final nail came when a local TV station picked up the story. They didn't air the interview he gave. They aired the video of me slamming down the folder in front of 50 witnesses. They played it on the evening news like a morality tale. Anchors shook their heads and warned viewers about mixing personal indiscretions with corporate responsibility. By the weekend, my lawyer called with a smirk in her voice. Public opinion is leaning hard in your favor. Judges read the news too. He's bleeding credibility, and you've barely lifted a finger. That night, I scrolled through the hashtags one last time, not to gloat, but to mark the shift. His carefully built image, the polished executive, the family man, was gone. He was a meme, a punchline, a cautionary tale. And in the quiet of my sister's guest room, with Julia asleep down the hall, I whispered to myself, he wanted a war of appearances. Now the whole world sees him for what he is. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about exposure. His mask had cracked, and no amount of PR could glue it back together. He had tried to weaponize the narrative. Instead, the narrative had devoured him, and I was just getting started. When the public humiliation stopped being news and started becoming evidence, that's when the real dismantling began. My lawyer called it Phase 2. I called it justice. The divorce filings moved fast. With the receipts, the credit card statements, and the viral clips of his implosions, the judge had no patience for his excuses. Within weeks, temporary custody was granted to me. He tried to argue for shared custody, claiming I was alienating Julia from him, but his own text messages to the mistress contradicted every word. The judge looked him dead in the eye and said, "Mr. Zadovsky, this isn't a PR campaign. This is a court of law." The condo went on the market and sold within 10 days, just like I'd planned. Half the profit came directly to me because my inheritance had funded the purchase. The other half was frozen pending settlement. He begged the court to release more funds for living expenses, but the judge limited him to a stipend barely enough for rent on a one-bedroom. Watching a man who once flaunted tailored suits and imported scotch argue about utility bills was almost surreal. His firm cut ties quietly but definitively. The leave of absence became a termination. They offered him severance only on the condition that he sign an NDA about the internal inquiry. He took it, of course. Pride can't feed you when your accounts are empty. But even that payout was routed through the court, carved into child support and legal fees before it touched his hands. Family fallout came next. His father, who had once boasted at every holiday dinner about his brilliant son climbing the ladder, stopped returning his calls. At one point, I heard he'd been turned away at the family home in Newton, told bluntly by his own parents, "You made your bed." His brother, who had initially tried to mediate, pulled back entirely after seeing the court documents. In their eyes, I wasn't the enemy. He was the embarrassment. The mistress didn't last long either. Once HR finished their review, she was dismissed. No fanfare, just an email and a security escort out of the building. She moved out of the condo she'd been half living in and vanished from social media altogether. A friend told me she'd taken a retail job in another city, starting over with nothing but whispers trailing her. The fairy tale she thought she'd stolen turned into a footnote in someone else's downfall. Through all of this, I kept Julia insulated. She stayed in her school, surrounded by stability, while I handled the storm outside. When she asked where Daddy was, I told her the truth, gently. He's living somewhere else for now, because adults sometimes make choices that hurt families. She nodded, thoughtful, and went back to drawing. Her resilience reminded me every day why this fight mattered. By summer, the divorce was finalized. Assets were divided, custody secured, accounts settled. What had once been a joint empire of savings, property, and reputation now lay in ruins at his feet. He had no career, no mistress, no family standing beside him. Just debts, shame, and the echo of choices he couldn't undo. And me? I had my daughter, my independence, and the clean start I'd been too afraid to claim for years. Watching the gavel fall in that courtroom wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was the confirmation that betrayal had consequences, and this time, the consequences had stripped him of everything he'd used to hold power over me. He was broke, isolated, and forgotten by the same people who once raised glasses in his honor. And I was free. It was late September when he finally asked to meet. Not through lawyers, not through court summons, just a simple text. Please, one last time, I need to talk to you. I almost ignored it, but some endings deserve to be spoken aloud. We met at the condo we once called home. The place was empty now, walls stripped bare, echoes filling the rooms where laughter and arguments used to live. He stood in the living room, hands shoved into his pockets, his suit wrinkled, his shoes scuffed. I had never seen him so diminished. Rachel, he started, his voice hoarse. I know I don't deserve anything. But please, I need you to hear me. I set my bag down on the counter and crossed my arms. Go ahead. He looked at me like a drowning man reaching for a rope. I messed up. I was stupid, selfish. I thought I could have both. The career, the excitement, the attention, without losing you. I didn't realize how much you held me together until you were gone. His eyes watered, though whether from regret or self-pity, I couldn't tell. I stayed silent. He stepped closer. I've lost everything. My job, my reputation, even my parents won't return my calls. Julia barely speaks to me. And her... He swallowed, shaking his head. She left when the money dried up. I don't blame you for hating me, but please, I can't keep living like this. Give me a chance to fix it. To fix us. His words fell flat against the emptiness of the condo. For years, I had begged him to show up, to be faithful, to respect what we had built. And now, when there was nothing left, he wanted absolution. Fix us? I said quietly. You destroyed us the moment you let her sit in my chair. You showed me exactly where I stood in your world. He winced, but I kept going. I sacrificed for you. I paid for this home. I raised Julia while you were out pretending to be some Wall Street king. And when I confronted you, you didn't apologize. You humiliated me. Twice. And now, when the world finally sees who you are, you want me to patch the holes? Tears rolled down his face. I don't know who I am without you. And that was the truth. He didn't want me. He wanted the scaffolding I had built around his hollow life. I stepped close enough to see the desperation in his eyes. My voice was steady, sharp. You're the architect of your own destruction. You built this mess brick by brick, and you don't get to ask me to carry it now. He broke then, shoulders slumping, a sob tearing loose as he covered his face with his hands. I felt nothing. No pity, no temptation. Just the clean detachment of someone finally free. I picked up my bag and walked to the door. He didn't follow. Before I left, I turned once, delivering the last line he would ever hear from me. This was your masterpiece. Live in it. The door shut behind me with a final click, sealing the chapter for good. A year later, Boston looked different to me. Not because the skyline had changed, but because I no longer saw it through the fog of someone else's shadow. The condo was long gone, the court battles finished, and the weight I'd carried for years had finally lifted. Julia and I lived in a smaller but brighter apartment near the Charles. The walls were filled with her artwork, not silent tension. Every evening, we cooked together, laughed at our own inside jokes, and built routines that belonged to us alone. She was stronger too, sharper in the way she asked questions, bolder in the way she carried herself. I saw resilience in her that mirrored my own, and I knew she would never mistake loyalty for submission. Professionally, I thrived. I returned to consulting work, the kind I had set aside years ago to support him. Clients came quickly, partly because people had seen my name in the news and admired the quiet strength behind the chaos. What once embarrassed me became an unshakable brand, a woman who didn't crumble when tested. As for him, his name barely appeared anymore, except in cautionary tales passed around by finance blogs. Word was he'd left Boston, drifting between short-term rentals and temp contracts. His empire had shrunk to a handful of old suits and a reputation so stained it couldn't be salvaged. He was no longer my concern. One evening, Julia asked if I was happy. I thought about it carefully before answering. Happiness wasn't fireworks or grand gestures. It was freedom. It was knowing I had walked through betrayal and humiliation and come out on the other side whole. It was the quiet certainty that I would never again let someone else decide my worth. I kissed her forehead and told her, "Yes, I am happy." Standing at the window that night, I let the city lights wash over me. Betrayal had gutted my world, but it also carved space for something new. For strength, for clarity, for a life I chose without compromise. And as the river glimmered below, I whispered the truth I had earned. Freedom isn't given, it's taken. And I had taken mine back.